Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into the weeds of curricular game design. Our goal is to figure out how we can transform standard learning experiences, make them genuinely motivating, like the best commercial games do.
Right, basically borrowing or maybe stealing what makes those games so addictive and applying it to education.
Exactly. And we have to start by looking at this thing called the engagement gap. It's pretty stark. I mean, one source mentioned a student saying they felt they had to power down when they went into school.
Yeah, that phrase really hits hard, doesn't it?
It does. And it highlights this huge contrast between, the structured, often passive school day and the incredibly complex, engaging things kids do outside of school.
And it's not trivial. There's data showing almost half of high school dropouts said a major reason was just classes weren't interesting. But here's the fascinating part. Students don't dislike hard work or complexity itself. They actually crave it when it's framed right.
So it's about the framing.
Completely. We need to tap into what gamers call hard fun. That's that internal drive pushing players through hours of tough challenges. And they do it with no money on the line, no grades. Just the satisfaction of mastering something difficult, that's the energy we need.
Okay, so before we even get into design specifics, the core idea here is creating a space for problem solving where the risks are lowered.
Precisely. A risk-reduced environment. You let players experience the consequences of big decisions, like in history or science, virtually.
Without the real world fallout.
Exactly. And that safety, that freedom from real penalty, is what unlocks genuine experimentation and deeper learning.
All right, let's dig into how games actually do that. What are the pedagogical tricks they're using, maybe without even realizing it?
Well, they often naturally implement really sound learning principles, take mastery learning.
Where you have to prove you get something before moving on.
Right. Games bake this in with leveling up. You master one level's challenges, then you move to the next. Harder one, it feels earned.
And it keeps you right at the edge of your ability.
Perfectly put. It often keeps players in their zone of proximal development, or ZPD. That's Vygotsky's idea. The sweet spot where something is challenging but doable with help.
Okay.
And games provide that help as just-in-time learning or scaffolding. Hints, tutorials, feedback, right when you stumble.
And the feedback is immediate. That seems crucial.
Oh, absolutely. Think about turning in a paper versus playing a game.
Yeah, you get the grade days later, maybe a few comments. The original spark, the interest, it's long gone.
But in a game, the feedback is instant. You try something, it works or it doesn't, and you know why immediately.
Which brings us back to risk-taking. How does that safety net work psychologically?
Academics call it a psychosocial moratorium. It's like a temporary space where you can try on identities or strategies without lasting consequences.
The failure isn't really failure.
It's just data. Input for your next attempt. It's instructive, not punitive like a bad grade feels.
Okay, so instant feedback, low stakes for failure. I also saw something about neurotransmitters. Are games like hacking our brains?
Well, in a way, that immediate positive feedback succeeding at something tricky triggers neurotransmitters like dopamine, acetylcholine.
The stuff involved in pleasure and memory.
Exactly. They help consolidate the memory of what worked. So the reward reinforces the learning neurologically.
But it has to be tied to the actual learning, right? Not just, points for clicking.
Absolutely critical. The reward needs to be intrinsic to mastering the skill or understanding the concept. Otherwise, it's just manipulation.
So what's the flip side? What should designers absolutely avoid?
Delayed feedback is killer. Vague feedback, too. Or rewards that are purely external and disconnected from the actual task.
Like the sticker chart example.
Right. If the game's about critical analysis, but the reward is just a badge completely unrelated to the analysis itself, you break that connection. Players then start gaming the reward system, not mastering the skill.
Okay, makes sense. So we know why games work psychologically. How do we actually build one? Let's talk structure. Sounds like we need a plan before we code anything.
Definitely. You can't just add game elements randomly. Good educational game design often mirrors the backward design approach used in curriculum development.
Start with the end in mind.
Exactly.
Right.
First, you identify the enduring understanding. What's the big idea you want players to grapple with long after they finish playing?
Like, history isn't just facts, it's interpretation.
Perfect example. That's something deep, like no history is truly objective. Then step 2, translate that big idea into an essential question. And this is crucial. It cannot be a yes-no question.
Why not?
Because a yes-no question closes inquiry. An essential question opens it up. Think about the difference. Asking, was the Cold War a real war, leads to one kind of game. probably definition-focused.
Okay.
But asking, how is the Cold War like a war, pushes you towards a game about strategy, resources, maybe proxy conflict.
Ah, I see. And how could the Cold War have been prevented? That's a completely different game again. Diplomacy and negotiation, maybe?
Precisely. The question dictates the core experience. After that, you define the scope. Is this a single lesson? A whole unit? And the theme.
Theme being the feeling.
The vibe.
Yeah, the emotional resonance. What experience are you trying to create? And it has to be something that holds meaning for your players, connects with them somehow.
So you've got the goal, the question, the scope, the feel. But games aren't just stories, they're systems, right?
Absolutely. Our sources say games are systems for producing meaning through active experience. So you have to model your topic as a system.
How do you model something complex like, say, an ecosystem or an economy?
A common technique is using stocks and flows. Think of a bathtub.
Okay.
The amount of water in the tub is the stock, like national debt.
Mhm.
It's a quantity at a point in time.
Got it.
The water flowing in through the faucet or out through the drain, those are the flows, rates of change, like the annual budget deficit or surplus.
So modeling forces you to identify the key variables and how they influence each other. That seems like the learning right there. It is. Deciding what's a stock, what's a flow, and how they connect is the pedagogical act.
But reality is messy, like incredibly complex. If you simplify too much for the model, don't you risk teaching something wrong?
That's the art and the challenge. You have to level complexity. A model that perfectly mirrors reality would be unusable. Too complex isn't fun, and it's not educational either. You can't see the patterns.
So the goal isn't a perfect simulation.
Not at all. It's about simplifying strategically to illuminate the core dynamics, the underlying principles you want players to understand. You abstract reality to make it graspable.
And then you layer in identity, putting the player in a role.
Yes, this is huge. Taking on a role, a scientist, a city planner, a historian, lets players see the system from the inside. It fosters what our sources call embodied empathy for a complex system. You're not just reading about being a diplomat. You're acting like one, making choices within those constraints.
Learning the language and the mindset by doing.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have the structure, the system, the role. Now, the actual gameplay. What makes it feel like a game and not just, a glorified quiz?
The core game mechanic. This is the absolute heart of it.
The thing you do over and over?
Yes, the repeated action that the player practices and gets better at.
Yeah.
And critically, it must align with your learning objective.
Can you give an example?
Sure. If your goal is for students to get better at historical analysis comparing source reliability,
Then the core mechanic can't be a word search or trivia.
right, it needs to be something like constructing an argument using evidence from sources or maybe rating source credibility based on criteria. The action itself builds the skill.
A mismatch there kills the whole thing.
Totally. And you need to think about the type of challenge too. Is it a puzzle or a problem?
What's the difference?
Puzzles generally have one correct solution. They're good as, like, choke points to check if a player has graphed a specific concept.
Okay, like a lock and key.
Sort of. Whereas problems have multiple valid solutions or paths. These are much better for teaching the underlying properties of the system. They force players to experiment, to be creative, because there isn't just one right answer they have to find.
Right, that encourages deeper thinking. And rules are obviously important here. They provide the constraints that make it challenging and fun.
Paradoxically, yes. Constraints breed creativity. Think about a game like Taboo the Fun is because of the forbidden words.
Okay, so we have mechanics, challenges, rules. Let's circle back to feedback. You mentioned that not yet mindset.
Yes, adopting that leveling up mentality is key. It's inherently more egalitarian. It implies everyone can get there with enough effort.
Instead of just you failed.
Right. The feedback loop should encourage revision, trying again, revise and resubmit, essentially, but instantly within the game.
And you also mentioned making failure fun. How does that work?
Amusing failure states. Sometimes the most memorable learning comes from spectacular failure.
Like mixing the wrong chemicals in a virtual lab and getting a harmless cartoon explosion?
Exactly. Or making a bad policy choice in a sim game and seeing the funny, exaggerated consequences. It makes players want to experiment, even fail on purpose sometimes, just to see what happens.
So they learn the boundaries of the system by pushing them. Learning what not to do is still learning?
Definitely. And finally, you need to show progress clearly.
The progress bar.
The humble progress bar, or something like it. It's vital. It tells the player where they are, how far they've come, how far they have to go. It taps into both motivation, I want to finish this, and satisfaction. Look how much I've done. But, and this is important, it must track player progress, things they've achieved or mastered.
Not just time elapsed.
Exactly. Tracking time isn't motivating if the player feels stuck. It has to reflect their agency and accomplishment.
Okay, this sounds great, but maybe a bit daunting. Does designing this stuff require, like, a computer science degree and a team of artists?
Not at all. That's a common misconception.
Yeah.
You can start very low tech. The first step is actually just pitching the idea.
Pitching it. To who?
To your potential players, your students. It's called promotyping, like prototyping, but with a promo, an elevator pitch. You describe the core conflict, the essential question, the role they play, the main challenge. See if the idea grabs them. Does the fantasy of, say, managing a fragile ecosystem resonate?
Before you build anything.
Before you even sketch anything.
Yeah.
If the core concept doesn't spark interest, fancy graphics won't save it.
And you're saying even the prototype can be low-tech, pen and paper, index cards.
Absolutely. Some of the best games started that way. Remember, graphics are about communication, not photorealism. Research shows students judge educational games against school activities, not AAA blockbuster games. They expect good design, a compelling system, not necessarily flashy visuals.
So if the prototype works, and you build a simple paper or digital prototype, then comes testing.
Crucial step, play testing. It happens in phases. First, maybe gray box testing, where you, the designer, play it yourself to catch the really obvious bugs or broken parts. Oh, it's hard to see flaws in your own creation.
Because you know how it's supposed to work.
Exactly. Then you move to alpha testing, usually with peers, other educators or designers, and finally, beta testing with your actual target audience, the students. Sometimes you use tissue testers.
Tissue testers.
Yeah, fresh players who haven't seen the game before. You only get one shot with them before they're tainted by knowing the secrets or solutions. Their first reactions are golden.
And during all this testing, the designer's role is what?
To shut up and watch. Seriously, it's called deep listening.
Hard to do when you see someone struggling with your baby.
Incredibly hard. But you're testing the game, not the player. You need to see where the game is unclear or confusing. Ask them to think aloud. What are you trying to do now? Why did you make that choice? Observe their actions. If they're stuck, it's likely a design flaw, not a player flaw.
So if they misunderstand an instruction or misuse a resource?
That tells you the interface or the rules or the feedback needs refinement. The game needs fixing.
And the overall goal of all this iteration and testing is to hit that sweet spot.
Yeah, the low floor and high ceiling. Easy enough for beginners to get started and feel successful quickly.
But deep and complex enough to keep advanced players engaged and challenged over time.
That balance is where real learning and player authorship happens.
Okay, so wrapping this up. It feels like the power of these curricular games goes way beyond just making learning fun.
Oh, much deeper. They provide context, which is often missing in traditional lessons. They provide intrinsic motivation. And crucially, they give students authorship.
They're directing their own journey through the game world.
Exactly. And that shifts the whole frame of education. It becomes less about learning about a subject.
And more about learning to become.
Precisely. Learning to become a scientist by doing virtual science. Learning to become a historian by wrestling with conflicting sources within the game system.
And the research suggests this type of learning actually transfers better.
Yes, there's evidence that game-based learning can promote transfer applying skills or concepts learned in one context to new situations.
So the example given was players of civilizations starting to see history less as dates and events.
And more as a complex system, a pattern of interactions governed by rules and resources, a fundamental shift in thinking.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener. If playing a game can shift someone's whole understanding of history like that, what fundamental shift in thinking about your field, your area of expertise, could a well-designed game create? What transformation of identity could that kind of powerful learning experience provide?
That's the real potential here.
Thanks for diving deep with us.